Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, then let's go ahead and get started. So, today we are going to be talking about secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue, and burnout. This is something that is impactful on helping professionals. It's something that can happen to people in every industry, but especially with this one, I think it's super, super important to be aware of just because of the work that we do. So I want to start off with a couple of definitions. Um, Something that I learned during this presentation, I originally gave this presentation a few years ago, and the secondary traumatic stress was actually referred to as vicarious trauma. Going back and, editing this and kind of putting it up to date, I realized that a lot of places are now referring to it as secondary traumatic stress, which I thought was interesting. Um, so I think that makes sense based on kind of the lingo for, post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think that it kind of is like a form of, that vicarious trauma. But the definition for this is the emotional residue of exposure that counselors or, helping professionals have. Um, and this could be anything from, therapists, advocates, nurses, EMTs, lots and lots and lots of different, um, professionals could fall under that category. From working with people as they're hearing their trauma stories and become witnesses to the pain, fear, and terror that trauma survivors have endured. Um, so we have our vicarious trauma or secondary victimization. Now let's look at compassion fatigue. What is compassion fatigue? So this is something that kind of develops over time. It is indifference and apathy to those who are suffering as a result of frequent overexposure to people in need, characterized as an inability to react sympathetically or empathetically to a crisis or needed situation. So this is basically getting to a point where there is not much left in the reservoir and you're not able to respond correctly to those that you are working with. So those are kind of the differences between that two. And then let's talk about burnout. And I'm sure that with the group that we have here on, I'm sure y'all are familiar with the term burnout. This is a state of being emotionally or physically drained to the point that one cannot perform functions meaningfully. This one is one that I think has become a little bit more buzzwordy in kind of media lately. Um, and I think it's good that we're using it. And I think it's good that we're having conversations about burnout and the burnout that I think people realize that they started having after COVID. But I think it's important to remember to use it, appropriately and when it is, accurate. So a social worker being burnt out from their job may be someone who is not being their best self, right? They're not able to show up to their work and do what they used to be able to do. It may look like emotional, physical exhaustion, cynicism, right? Um, Maybe in our field, not believing survivors or questioning parts of their stories that maybe they didn't do that before, but they became like kind of almost like numb to it. And then decreased perceived efficacy. Basically, they start to think that what they're doing doesn't matter quite as much and that they're not able to make as much change as they maybe realized before. This may exist with compassion fatigue. Like these can all exist simultaneously, but I like to talk about the key differences between them. Um, Originally, I'd done this presentation for the same nurse population, and I thought that it was very interesting that it was noted that nurses are especially vulnerable to burnout. I think that this would also kind of go across, like I said, all helping professionals, the people who are kind of seeing people in that crisis mode and responding to them like that. Okay. And this is just a comic I thought was kind of silly. So it says, stressed Eric, this picture stressed Eric, and the burnt out Eric. It said Eric was too tired to pose for this cartoon. His apologies. So burnout may look like not being able to do those small things. I wanted to use this one as kind of like a comparison point for the differences between the two. So burnout is something that happens over time. And it can be something that can be like changed through taking a break, taking a vacation, doing a new job, switching kind of careers or switching what you're working on for a bit to kind of reignite that. Um, and it's going to be something that's going to result as a feeling of helplessness or inefficiency at work. So this is going to be something that's kind of like almost more down, right? And then you have secondary traumatic stress, where this is where you're experiencing and showing symptoms that look really similar to PTSD. So having that constant state of tension, maybe some hyperarousal, maybe some hypervigilance, being preoccupied by the trauma that you have heard from patients, from clients, kind of being in that arousal state, like we talked about, where we're on edge. We're looking around us. We're, kind of feeling like at any moment, you could need to be alert for something. Um, Maybe avoiding talking or thinking about this. So this is avoiding, thinking of the event, avoiding reimagining of the event that was told to you, those sorts of things. And then also kind of a numbness, not being able to feel the emotions, some sort of depressive symptoms almost. So I think it's important to kind of look at the two major differences, or the major differences between these two, because burnout is almost like less, and the STS, or secondary traumatic stress, this is going to be like more like you're on edge, you're experiencing trauma symptoms, really. And when I say experiencing trauma symptoms, I do want to go over, a list of those, because this can look different for each person. But I think it's important to kind of have an idea about what to look for. So a symptom of this may be having difficulty talking about their feelings, not being able to debrief like they used to be able to. Anger, irritation, having that startle effect or being jumpy. That is that, hyper arousal effect, right? Where it's like, you notice they kind of are a little bit more easily startled. Maybe you show up behind them and they jump, or they hear a balloon pop and they freak out. Maybe they didn't do that before. Changes in eating patterns, excessive overeating, excessive not eating at all, not eating enough, not getting nutrients in. Difficulty with sleep. Maybe they're sleeping too much. Maybe they're sleeping too little. They can't get to sleep. Worry that they are not doing enough for their clients. And I do want to caveat this one, because I think that this one is a little bit more common and more than just a symptom of this, but kind of that excessive worry on top of these other symptoms. Having dreams or like reimaginations about the clients and the client's trauma experiences. um, that's a big part of that PTSD diagnosis, is kind of the reimagining. So kind of having that vicarious experience. Diminished joy towards things they once did enjoy. So again, some more, kind of depression type symptoms, where we're not enjoying or getting pleasure out of things that we used to. Feeling trapped by their work. Diminished feelings of satisfaction and personal achievement. So maybe something that would make them proud before, it's just kind of like it doesn't matter anymore. Dealing with intrusive thoughts of clients with severe trauma histories. So not being able to effectively deal with clients because we're having our own things going on. Feelings of hopelessness associated with working clients. Kind of being a little pessimistic about what's going on, and maybe not feeling like, they can help. Back to that efficacy, maybe it's just not going to ever be different. It's not ever going to change, because I feel like right now, it's not going to change, those sorts of things. And then blaming others, kind of having a little bit of a combative defensive attitude. I thought that a couple of these studies that I looked into are very interesting, and I wanted to share them just because I think that it gave some important insight to this. So especially in victim advocates, which is, a lot of the individuals that we typically see on these sorts of calls. And we have some victim advocates working at our center. So that's kind of why I chose to look at this population in general. The first study I looked at had 135 participants who were victim advocates, and they had them do an online survey. So in the results of this, they found that 50% of the surveyors had symptoms that correlated with secondary traumatic stress. I think that's important, right? So 50%, think about half of your office theoretically right now has secondary traumatic stress. That's a lot, right? And it also kind of shared some risk factors found. So these things, as they went up, the incidence went up, right? So hours worked per week. Makes sense, right? The more hours you're working for a week, the more likely you are to experience STS. Direct service hours. This is working directly with clients. The more you're doing that, the higher the risk is for you to develop STS. And working with adult survivors of child sexual abuse was also identified as a risk factor. The second study was a smaller study, but it was a little bit more detailed. So they did 9 victim advocates, they interviewed them, and they kind of looked at big themes and things that helped. A big thing that they found was they shift the STS kind of shifted their sorry, the symptoms of FTS were present, right? And with these advocates, they also noticed some burnout with these advocates. They also noticed a shift of worldview. And that is actually something that's super, super common after traumatic stress, is kind of that shifting of worldview of, maybe the world is not safe, maybe the world is not what I once thought it was, kind of that change. So it makes sense that individuals were able to kind of identify that, especially working as victim advocates. Some pieces that they found that were found to be, prevention efforts that helped combat with STS are having support from colleagues, which, makes sense, right? Because having individuals you're able to talk to, who you're able to rely on to get that support, get suggestions, that makes sense that would help. And also recognizing successes. So being able to, in the moments when success is present, being able to see it and have others, congratulate you for it, be there for it, rather than only recognizing maybe the downsides of the job. Some more risk factors that were identified were skipping breaks, taking extra shifts, coming in on off days, foregoing self-care. This can look like something simple as I'm just going to work through lunch today, or I'm not working, but I need to get XYZ paperwork done. So I'm just going to come in, and then, staying much longer than that because things are needed. So kind of taking on more than one needs to and not giving self time to recharge are those big risk factors. And so I'm curious, and this can be something that if you feel comfortable, unmuting your mic and sharing, or want to put it in the chat, how many of these have you done, continue to do, or anything else you think maybe would be something that you have found yourself done in the past that may identify as a risk factor? I know for me, I'm a lot better now, but when I first started working, I was really, really bad about skipping lunch. I would just kind of work through lunch because I didn't want to, take that extra 30 minutes. So I would just work through it. And I usually had stuff to do that it just made sense. But thankfully I'm a little bit better now about like kind of giving myself, time. I've also gotten a lot better with self-care over the years, kind of being able to set those boundaries. I think that's a big part of self-care. So anyone care to share any risk factors that maybe they might find themselves doing? And it's okay if not. Check the chat real quick. Okay. Well, then we will move on. Of course, if you think of anything or want to share, you can still put that in the chat. Let's talk about ways that helping professionals can combat secondary traumatic stress. So an important part of this is monitoring your levels of the burnout or compassion fatigue. I have some handouts for that, and I actually am going to have us do a couple of activities with that as well, and can email them if y'all would like later. Leaving work at work when possible. Now, this is very difficult for our field because a lot of our work is emotion based, right? And it's kind of hard to leave certain emotions at work. But when we're able to setting those boundaries of what goes home with you, right? Practicing detached concern, not getting overly involved with the people we work with, right? Setting boundaries with patients, that's a huge one, right? Not giving personal cell phone numbers, not and this is going to be a little bit different for each profession and how that looks, right? But not foregoing your own boundaries and pushing yourself to the limit where you're not going to be able to help them. Allowing yourself to say no, that's a big one. Again, boundaries. Admitting when you need help, taking time to do things that you enjoy. So this is part of that self-care, making sure that you are doing things in your life that are filling your cup back up, right? This could be baking, hiking, reading, journaling, spending time with friends, going on vacation, traveling, whatever that looks like for you, making sure you're making time. Um, I work as a therapist part-time outside of this, and then also with our victims and clients. But I always joke that you have to carve out time to relax. And yes, that sounds counter contradictory, but it's so true. You have to make that a priority, because if you don't, it'll very easy to not do it. Team debriefing, talking with your team and whatever methods are acceptable with confidentiality rules, of course. Sharing, kind of the burdens, talking, allowing yourself to, share the feelings you're having, sharing the symptoms you're having, reaching out to people for support and allowing them to be there. Maybe allowing someone to take a little bit off of your plate. So making sure that you're, open and honest with your team. And then practicing self-care, that kind of goes into the things you enjoy, to, I think, setting, honestly, emotional boundaries is a form of self-care. So all of these things kind of fall into that. Are there any specific, self-care points or things that you find in your work is beneficial to you, you like to do, kind of what your go-to is? Would anyone care to share what their, go-to self-care or um, enjoying things they enjoy is? And again, we can do chat or you can share via audio, but if not, that's okay too. Okay. Well, we will move on. Um, these are just kind of a couple graphics that I like. I thought that they were cool, and I thought that, they kind of did a good job of explaining this a little bit more. So, the cat here, it's good to take care of yourself. So is every other day. The classic can't pour from an empty cup. Self-care isn't selfish. Looking at, all the different kinds of self-care that are more than just, the usual, what we think of, oh, go get a massage every week, or, you know, 10-step skincare routine. It's, it, it can be a lot different than that, right? It can be, and it should be, things you can do day to day, to take care of yourself. And this one I really like because it's looking at all the aspects, taking care of yourself physically. Some days self-care may be looking like, I made myself take that shower today, right? Mental care, that debrief with colleagues, seeing your own therapist, reaching out and having a support system for you and all you deal with. Also kind of goes into that emotional care, right? Making sure that you're not overextending your emotional boundaries. One of my favorite quotes about boundaries is, boundaries allow a space where I can love you and I can love me. So not overextending again too much to where you're not able to be effective to others, but also not doing too much to where, you're not taking into account your own self and what you can handle. So, as always, want to introduce, some self-care ideas. I think something that's kind of fun too is talking to friends and saying, like, what do you do to take care of yourself? Like, what is something you like to do in your free time? Maybe get some new ideas. Um, for this profession and other some professions, maybe joining a peer support group. I think that that could be something that is super, super beneficial and something that might, really be helpful, to know that you're not alone and others feel this way. And again, getting ideas, bouncing ideas off each other, what works, what doesn't. Exercising. I mean, there's really not enough that can be said about how beneficial exercising can be to physical and mental well-being. Meditation, journaling, practicing mindfulness, listening to music. And like I said, sometimes it's making that time for basic self-care, right? Bathing, normal sleep schedule, watching what you're eating, making sure your body's getting what it needs, exercising, doing a check-in on yourself. That's really important. It's something that I think that maybe we don't take the time each day to check in and see, how am I doing? What are the emotions, rolling around today? Have I taken care of myself? Have I eaten? Have I slept? Have I drank water? Sometimes it is as simple as those basic things. So we do have this mindfulness exercise. But with this, I'm not sure if it's going to share the audio. So I'm going to try and we'll see if we can share the audio. Um, well, say that. Um, where is it? Okay. So I like this 3-minute body scan one. I think that this one's awesome. And let me make sure that I can. Okay, here we go. We're gonna. Should let me share it now.
Begin by bringing your attention into your body. You can close your eyes if that's comfortable to you. You can notice your body seated, wherever you're seated, feeling the weight of your body on the chair, on the floor. You can take a few deep breaths. And as you take a deep breath, bring in more oxygen, enlivening the body. And as you exhale, have a sense of relaxing more deeply. You can notice your feet on the floor. Notice the sensations of your feet touching the floor, the weight and pressure, vibration, heat. You can notice your legs against the chair, pressure, pulsing, heaviness, lightness. Notice your back against the chair. Bring your attention into your stomach area. If your stomach is tense or tight, let it soften. Take a breath. Notice your hands. Are your hands tense or tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Notice your arms. Feel any sensations in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft. Notice your neck and throat. Let them be soft. Relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. Then notice your whole body present. Take one more breath. Be aware of your whole body as best you can. Take a breath, and then when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Okay. Um, I just want you to take a moment to, sorry, excuse my dog, to reflect on how that felt for you. Did you find yourself distracted? Did you find yourself able to follow it well? Think about how that exercise really, worked for you, didn't work. While y'all kind of take a moment to do that, I have a couple of activities that I wanted to go through, which were kind of scales for the compassion, fatigue, and burnout. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with those. All right. So it looks like this is, kind of a checklist of different sections. I'm going to scroll down through each section. I'm going to give you about like 3 minutes, I think, for each section. I'll just do like a little timer on my end to allow you to go through and fill this out. So basically, it has a bunch of statements, and you are going to put an X in the 0 through 6 box of how often you do this. And with this, it is, so the first one, I feel emotionally drained by my work. Never, a few times a year, once a month, few times per month, once a week, few times per week, or every day. And just kind of do that through section A. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes for section A to go ahead and do that. I'm going to start a timer, and then we will check back in and make sure that after you're done with section A too, you want to total up your score for it. Okay, so I am going to move the screen to show the next section. This is going to be section B. Same thing as this one, it's just different statements, but the same scoring system. And that's the timer. All right, so we'll go ahead and give it 3 more minutes. Okay, so that is section B. We're gonna go to section C now, and we'll do another 3 minutes for this one real quick. Okay, so now that we've done all three of those sections, um, I'm gonna very quickly show the scoring results. This may be something you want to take a picture of or have for later because I'm going to send this over. Just because I don't want to spend too much time on this so I can get to the next one because we're running out of time a little bit. But yeah, it says section A is scoring for burnout, depersonalization, and personal achievement, and C. So it says high score in the first two sections, low score in the last section may indicate burnout. So it kind of has levels there. All right, so we are going to go on to the secondary traumatic stress scale. So this one is a little bit trying to figure out if I can get all of them. Okay, so I am going to give about 5 minutes for this one. I'm going to show 1 through 11 or so. And then I am going to move it down the last like 2-3 minutes. And then we're going to get to scoring for this one. So this is the STS scale, and it says looking at the past 7 days. This one's going to be time. And again, it's that Likert scale, never, rarely, occasionally, often, very often for these statements. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer for this one and let y'all go ahead and get started on looking through it. Okay, and so for this one, we're gonna look at the scoring instructions. So there's a scale below. The items are the ones that like based on what number it was. And then add the 3 scores in the right-hand column for a total score. So if that makes sense to you, what you put for 2 would be added up with what you put for 3, 6, 10, 13 for this score, vice versa. The rest of those. So I'll give you about maybe like 2 minutes to add those up just because we're running a little slower on time. And then we will check in a minute. Okay. Okay. So, with that score you got, there's a little interpretation scale here. So it's little or no, mild, moderate, high, or severe. So take a moment and figure out where you kind of fall on this scoring. And again, if you want to take a picture, might be a little bit easier so you can look back on it later. Okay. So, I just kind of wanted to do those little exercises because I think it's important sometimes to use that as like a check-in for self. If you are interested in me emailing those over to you so that you can, use them or look back on them, let me know, drop your email in the chat, or you can email me at rcaservices@gmail.com. That's the best way to contact me. And I can send those over to you. But would anyone be interested in sharing? And let me stop the recording.